Okay, let's go ahead and get started. We're recording it. So for people who join late, they'll be able to catch up with us later. It is so great to see you all. Thanks for signing up for this session, and thank you for spending some of your precious time with me. I am such a big fan of the Catalyst 2030 community. So typically anytime they ask if I can come spend time with you all, I usually jump at the opportunity. I was excited to do this session today, a class on how to activate your board of directors around fundraising efforts, because this is a topic that I receive questions on all the time. Oh, Eric, I just saw you pop up in the chat. It's so great to have you here. This is a question I receive all the time from people. How do I activate my board? And then from board members, I often hear like, I don't quite know how to plug in, and I'm not quite sure how I can offer better assistance to the organization I'm serving. So I think there's so much work to be done in our sector around how to really maximize our board and how to really activate them around our fundraising efforts. But I'm going to take it a step further. I realize this is a fundraising course, but I also want to think about how can we activate our board members to be really great spokespeople for our organization. How can we employ them to go out into the world and talk about our organization and the work we do and the impact we have in a way that will hopefully lead to fundraising results down the road? All right. So let me pull up some slides just to get started. And you guys, I want to be really clear. I'm going to be talking a lot, but please put questions in the chat. It's even fine to unmute if you'd like. I want this to be interactive if possible. I realize we've got 50 people in the room, but don't worry about stopping to ask a question. I want to make sure that everybody is following along. All right, so here we are. My name is Lisa Corcoran, and I come to you today from a social enterprise based in the United States called For Impact. For Impact is a social enterprise that works with organizations around the world around fundraising. We help organizations develop their vision, fund their vision, and then kind of build the support team to do that alongside. We have been around for about 30 years, and I think we've worked on every continent except Antarctica. And, at any given time, we're working in probably 40 different countries. We have, for the last 30 years, worked with about 5,000 organizations who would attribute their work with us to raising over $2 billion US. One thing I really do love about our work is I think that we have a really unique vantage point when it comes to this fundraising landscape. The reason being, in any given year, about 40% of the work we do is with funders who hire us to work with their partners to train their portfolios, or who ask us to come in and support their partners. We work with a lot of accelerator programs, and then the other 60% of the work we do is with organizations themselves. So we do a lot of training, but we're also out in the field ourselves, working alongside our organizations and helping them to raise money. So I think we bring a unique vantage point when it comes to this landscape we find ourselves in. What I'm going to share with you today are things that we see working out in the field and things that social impact leaders tell us are working. If you can imagine in this session, there's like, if we were all in person, which would be lovely, if you can imagine like a table. And over the course of this session, I'm going to be putting some different ideas, tools.
Hold on. Sorry, Lisa. Go ahead. You got muted somehow. Go ahead. You're fine.
Okay, thanks, Debbie. That's really funny. We're off to a good start if I'm on mute. So some of these tools you'll take right away, and hopefully, they'll bring some value to your organization. Some of them you might leave on that table and dust them off down the road. But I want to share with you what we see and hear is working out in the field. I actually came to fundraising by way of board service. So this class is especially near and dear to my heart. I'm a lawyer by training and worked in the legal field for about 15, 17 years. And during this time, I sat on boards that, for causes and organizations that I was interested in. And this is where perhaps hubris got the best of me, because I thought as a lawyer, I could show up to these boards and offer value through some legal, support. What I quickly learned is that while some of these organizations needed legal support, like 1 or 2 days a year, usually right around filing time when you're filing your papers, and the second being, if there's ever an HR issue, what I quickly learned is that these organizations all needed fundraising support 365 days a year. And as a board member, I had no idea what to do or how to do this. So I actually came to For Impact as a student to learn this art and science of fundraising. And what I quickly learned was that there's some really simple frameworks and methodologies that we can take and start applying that will lead to pretty quick results. So I would bring these methodologies back to the board, and I would bring them back to the staff of the organizations that I served. And I was immediately blown away by some of the changes that I saw. And so because of that, I realized that fundraising can often be like one of the largest leverage points to take an organization to the next level. So that is how I came to love this intersection of board service and fundraising. I'm excited to be here with you all today. I'm going to jump in right now. But before I do so, one last thing, I need to share that I am acutely aware of the fact that this is a humongous global audience calling in from around the world. I have not walked in your shoes, and I don't want to purport to ever have done so. I aim to be as inclusive as possible when I do these trainings, but if I ever do fail in that regard, please let me know. Feel free to ask questions throughout this session. And the slides that I'm sharing, I'm going to be writing on them during our time together. I use a tablet. So I'll be writing on them, and then we'll share these slides after this session is over. Sound good? Okay, great. All right. So I would like to start kind of with the $1 million question. I'd like to start with the $1 million question as it relates to boards and fundraising. And that is this: is the board of directors responsible for fundraising? This is kind of the question that's underlying all of this. Or maybe taking it a step further, what exactly is the board's role as it relates to fundraising? Sometimes organizations think my board is not doing enough. Sometimes board members think we're here to support, but that's your job as a staff, right? So there's kind of this misalignment in expectations around what the board should do as it relates to fundraising. I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but this is what we see across the sector and around the world. Where I land after having studied this for a long time and after having dived into many unique board situations, I think at the end of the day, the board has a fiduciary duty, a big duty, to ensure that the organization is sustainable and is on a good path. So we do, as board members, have a responsibility to ensure that there's financial viability, right? However, I don't think the staff should or can just pass this responsibility off to the board. I think of it as the staff is primarily responsible for fundraising. It's a function that should sit within the staff, but I think the board can often be the best ally that an organization has when it comes to fundraising. Okay. I think if you'll allow me to do like a cheesy analogy here, the way I think about it is if like an organization is a ship, right? The organization's like a ship, sailing across the ocean. I think the board can be like the wind that gets that ship to the next destination. That's when things are going well. I also think the board can be like the anchor that keeps that ship in place. So as we're out there talking to our boards, we want to figure out how to make them that wind to propel us to new destinations and new places. I'm going to presume I have some board members on here and some people who work with boards in their day job. So I'm going to kind of speak to both sides, but primarily I'm thinking about this from the point of view of an organization. Okay, so let's get to the heart of the matter, and that is, how can we engage our board around fundraising? All right, how can we engage our board around fundraising? One of the first things I want to make clear or recommend is that this is not a one-time thing, that we engage them once and then we check it off and we're done, right? This engaging around fundraising is something that we need to do early and often, all right? Early and often. So even let's start at the very beginning. When we are recruiting board members, one of the best pieces of advice I think I can give you is to have open and honest conversations around those fundraising expectations that you may have. It's really important that we address this early and that we align around what we hope to see so that we can avoid misaligned expectations down the road. Secondly, this is something that I think most organizations, to include ones I work with, all right, I'm not casting blame. I have done this exact thing many, many times. We want to be able to customize a recruitment profile that will capture the type of board member we're looking for. Okay, we want, and I don't want to subscribe or assign to any of you what type of board members you need, because I don't know your organizations well. But I will say, I think there's a pattern in the social sector where we sometimes look for board members who have reached a certain stature or who are so well connected or, you know, who have been working for 25 plus years, whatever it may be. There's so much emphasis right now on diversifying boards. And that is so important, right? We need to bring many voices to the table. It makes our organization stronger. This is my, I don't know, my public service announcement. As you are diversifying your board, think about diversifying it generationally too, with different ages. Because some of the best board members I have ever seen as it relates to fundraising efforts are millennials and Gen Z who show up like hungry and ready to work. They may not have all the connections in the world, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, but they're willing to do the work and put in the support. So when you're thinking about your recruitment profile, let's think about what exactly does your organization need as it relates to fundraising support, and then let's craft a profile around it and find that person. Okay, so that's step one, recruiting. Step two, in the onboarding process, we need to align around our fundraising hopes at that point too, right? And so a couple ways to do this. One that I love, and some of you might already have this, is a board member agreement. So when you're onboarding new board members, or for those current board members, if you don't have this already in place, you might want them to sign a board member agreement. All right, and I'm going to pull one up in just a second to show you an example. Actually, why don't I just do it right now? Because I've got you guys here. We're going to provide a copy. This is a guidebook that we've created to engage boards around fundraising and advocacy. And I'll include this in the chat at the end of our time together. But this is a draft board member agreement. All right, so you all can take it and make it your own. But I just want to show you what I'm talking about. This is what I mean when I say let's align around what we're expecting from that board. So here, you know, when possible, we're going to talk about the organization's work. All right, we are going to be able to represent our organization. Secondly, down here under resource development, we can actually include language around what we're expecting or what we are expecting our board members to do. Okay. So one great way to do this is to have a board member agreement. Okay. Secondly, and I'm going to spend some time talking about this today. If you have ever been to anything that For Impact has ever done, you have heard us talk about altitude framework for messaging. I'm going to do that today too. My apologies if you know this like the back of your hand, but for the new people, I want them to hear it. We need to onboard board members to the organization's message and communications. Why is this important? We want board members to be great spokespeople for our organization. If we have a board of 5 or 7 and we equip them with really strong messaging around the work our organization does, they can then go out into the world and share that. All right, it's like a ripple effect. Or another way to think about it is we're kind of weaving this web. So I'm going to talk about how to help them do that. Last but not least, in the onboarding phase, we want to set up an individual plan with each board member. All right. Some of you have maybe heard of this concept called the bystander effect. All right, the bystander effect. And I realize there's a lot of people in here, so I'm going to just talk through it rather than ask someone else to. I hope you don't mind. The bystander effect goes like this. The larger the group we're talking to, the lower their level of involvement or participation. Okay. This all came out of the idea that when you're yelling out to a crowd that you need help and there's a whole crowd there, everyone's going to think someone else has it. So true story, years ago, the American Red Cross, who in the US has the guidelines for how to do CPR, it used to be that if someone goes down, you run up to them and you check for a pulse, you listen for breathing, you yell out to the crowd, someone call 911, which is the emergency services number in the United States. And then and only then do you start doing your CPR, your chest compressions. And studies showed that precious time was lost because so many people in the crowd did not reach for their phone because everyone thought somebody else was going to do it. Okay. The training has been officially changed as of 3 years ago, and I can confirm this personally. I am CPR qualified for some volunteer work I do. And right now, when someone goes down, you run up, you check for the pulse, and you say, you, Debbie, I see you there. You call 911. And only when I see Debbie reaching for her phone, then do I start doing the chest compressions. All right. This is an extreme story. But the same thing applies to our board members. If we're at a board meeting, be it in person or on Zoom, and we've got however many people in the room, and we say, hey, I need you guys all go out and start talking about our organization, or I need you all to, help me think of names. They're all going to think someone else is going to do it. And these are our board members. Like, I understand that they're volunteering and they're giving us our time, but when we can connect with them one-on-one and come up with an individualized plan for how they can support our fundraising efforts, we are going to see much greater output and much greater results. All right, does that make sense, guys? I'll pause for a second in case anyone wants to jump in.
Minu, do you have, I think you just joined, so we'll mute. But I'll say this, Lisa, for us with Catalyst, is we found this in our working group meetings, is same idea, like we need help with somebody writing this case on this, and people wouldn't volunteer. But if we called people and we asked them ahead of time, would you be interested in, could you help us with this? No problem, I'll write an article, I'll do that. And we've flipped the way we've asked people because of that. So great example.
That's great. Thanks for sharing, Debbie. There's actually research around this from a university. I can't remember which one. It might be the University of Michigan here in the US, but 90% of generosity is unlocked by asking. This is a crazy statistic, and I didn't believe it, so I started Googling it. But a lot of times people don't think to step forward on their own, or they're just waiting to hear like how it relates to me. So if we can take that extra step and actually ask, that's going to unlock much, much more generosity than just putting out a blanket request. Okay, so now we're going to really get into the meat, guys, and that is once we have a board member, right? They're now on our board. We need to engage them. And the way we're going to engage them is what I'm going to cover next. And that's this 3-part framework: champion, invite, and invest, that I'm going to share with you. Before I move on, I want to just really take one last moment and share, or reiterate rather, the importance of defining and aligning expectations at every step of a board member journey. This is what's missing, I would say, in my experience. And I think if we can do this early and often from the recruitment phase until a board member steps down, and if we can work that into our processes and into our routines, we're going to see a big difference in board members' engagement around fundraising. Okay, so you came here, I suspect, to think through, how do I engage my board around fundraising? And we at For Impact have this really, really simple framework that we use. It's a 3-part framework, and it goes like this. You can be a really helpful and productive board member if you can do 3 things when it comes to fundraising. If you can be a champion of the organization, we're going to break each of these down. If you can invite, and if you can invest. All right. So let's start with the first one, which is actually, I think, oftentimes for board members, the biggest, and that is champion. All right. How can you be a champion for your organization? Or if you're an executive director or development director, how can you ask your board members to be champions? One thing, guys, I've heard this when I give this session internationally, people tell me sometimes that word champion doesn't always translate. Someone asked me once, like, does that mean be a winner? I don't mean be a winner. I mean be an advocate, be a supporter, be a support system. All right. So you want to be a voice and you want to help share the organization's story. So I'm going to list for you guys a few ways that I can see us asking our board members to be champions for our organization. But I'd also love to hear from you if you have any other ideas. So a couple great ones might be I'm going to start with the easiest lift, share social media posts. So easy, right? I mean, all it takes is a republish button on LinkedIn or on any other social media platform. You could write a blog or an op-ed. You could host a happy hour or a coffee. One of my favorite ways to be a champion is to write letters. There's like a lost art of letter writing. I don't know for you guys in the room when the last time you received a letter in the mail, but it's still magical. And some boards I sit on, we will write letters to funders thanking them for the work that they do and sending it in the mail. And that's a really easy way to engage a board member while deepening our relationship with that funder. A quick story around writing letters. I serve as an advisory board member, so not even a voting board member, for an organization where I live in Columbus, Ohio, that works in the foster care system. And we are a foster family. My family takes part in this work. And the nonprofit that we foster through recently, 6 or 8 months ago, received a grant of 100,000 US dollars. And the grant was earmarked for foster parent education. And I actually read about it in the news, like right when it happened. And so I reached out to the development director and I said, please let me reach out to this guy and tell him how important this is. And let me tell him how much the education and training I've gotten around trauma and trauma-informed care, how much it's empowered me and enabled me to be able to provide care for these kids. And so he didn't want to do a call with me, which is fine, but I did get his address. So I wrote a letter. It probably took me 10 minutes to write. And of course it was from a unique voice because we're foster parents, but I was able to share how important his gift was and how thankful we were. And I kid you not, true story, he got the letter, felt moved by it. And this was just a normal letter, was moved by it and doubled his gift. All right, this is a way that I think you can really bring your board members along to help provide a ton of support for your organization. All right, another way I think about board members being champions or supporters is to give a tour. You know, that can be on site if you have a campus, if you have an after school program, they could walk someone through, or it could be a virtual tour, right? It doesn't need to be so literal. So these are some ideas I have. I would love if anyone either in chat or if anybody feels brave enough to unmute, if anyone has any ideas that they can think of around the word champion or supporter, things they've seen working or things they would just brainstorming ideas. I'd love it if you could share a few. This is a chance for us, I think, to learn from each other.
I'm happy to speak for a second.
Oh,
Hi,
Nicole,
Lisa.
I didn't know you were in here. This is great.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, go ahead. Thanks. It's good to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just had a board member in my house. I think one of those things is that recognition is that like friends do what friends do. And so like really owning sort of this conversation about what's empowering to me about this with your friend networks and sort of that space of inviting the people that love you and care about you to know about the work that you do and not making it this sort of separate sort of thing. And so in the champion space, like champion in your individual networks, because it's moved you, it often moves the people that are around you. And I find that especially people who don't know what to contribute to or don't know how to do something, if it moves you, like that's almost good enough, right? And if they're looking for a way to do something, then you can sort of give them an easy avenue to support that and support you in the same place. So
That's awesome, Nicole. Thank you so much. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think our board member voice, when you're asking your board members to share their voice, we're asking them really to be themselves and share why they're giving their time, energy, and effort to this organization. So to that end, Nicole, you kind of take me up perfectly. I think one of the best ways our board members can be great champions for our organization is that they can be great spokespeople, right? So I'm going to just take us on a 5 minute, I don't want to call it a detour because I think we're like building a house together. It might feel a little bit like a detour, but I think it will all connect together. I want to take us on a little trip to talk about how we can ask our board members to speak about our organization. Okay. So there is this notion, and I believe it, that message is not what we say, but what somebody hears. I'm going to say it one more time because it hits home when you think about it. Message is not what we say, but it's what somebody hears. So as social impact leaders, ourselves and our board members, we want us all to be good messengers. We want to convey a great message that's going to inspire hope, that's going to be simple, and that's going to help someone understand what we're doing. So at For Impact, we use this altitude framework. Now, you guys, we did not create the altitude framework. We all use it every day. We say we're down in the weeds, or this is a high level overview. We simply take this altitude framework and we apply it to fundraising. Okay. Our goal, make it as easy as possible for a funder to understand what we do. All right. That's our end goal. Make it as easy as possible for them to understand. So we created this framework to answer the 3 questions that we believe every funder has. All right. This is a funder. I'm casting a wide net to include individuals, foundations, corporations, and institutional entities like governments. We find the 3 questions they have are, why do you exist? What do you do? Or where does the money go? And last question, how can I help? Or what do you need from me? We find that all funders have these 3 questions. All right. So as an organization, it's great to have a 10,000 meter message for yourself. This answers the question, why do you exist? And this is actually the place where we can derive the greatest engagement with a funder. There's this idea that we buy on emotion and justify with logic. We're going to become hooked on something like on an emotional level, and then our brain will follow. And this is our chance to connect with somebody. This, my friends, this 10,000 meter message is where board members should thrive. They should know off the top of their head what the 10,000 meter message for your organization is. All right. And actually, let me give an example to just put a little bit of substance to this idea. About 5 years ago, a woman, an executive director came to me, and her biggest challenge was she wanted to engage her board. She was a one-person show, and she was busy with operations and wanted to engage her board around fundraising. And her organization helped children diagnosed with cancer around the world, but they did not have an altitude framework yet. Okay. So we developed an altitude message for this organization. Let me just share with you their 10,000 meter message. It was something like, we exist to ensure that all children diagnosed with cancer have the same access to care and the same chance of survival. All right, no matter where they live. We exist to ensure that all children diagnosed with cancer will have the same access to care and the same chance of survival no matter where they live. Okay. Then we come on down to 5,000 meters. 5,000 meters answers the question, what do you do or where does the money go? This is the part that is really challenging for a lot of organizations because a lot of us have complex models and we have a hard time simplifying it and sharing it with a funder in a way that they leave the conversation feeling like they got it all. So we really have a challenge as a sector to simplify what we do at 5,000 meters. With this organization, what we came up with was that the organization does this by focusing on the child, the family, and the community. And they could talk about each of those in quite a bit of detail, right? For the child, we provide chemotherapy. We provide, transportation to and from the hospital. For the family, we have psychosocial support. For the community, we're making centers of excellence. I'm kind of brushing over this quickly, but I want you to hear how we took a whole bunch of programs and ideas and simplified it. We gave it a framing device, so that the board members felt really comfortable going out and using it. Last but not least, you guys, at 1 meter, that's how can the person help? Well, here's how you could help me. We're looking to raise this much money over this amount of time. There's a million ways we could talk about the 1 meter message. My big takeaway for you all today is I think at 1 meter, those board members should be pulling the staff in. Board members are probably not the best people to talk about funding needs and where the money is going to go, unless you have a very, very involved board. But if you can equip your board members with a 10,000 meter message for your organization and a 5,000 meter message, and then they could bring you in afterwards to talk at 1 meter, I think that's an ideal setup. So for this organization, the board was ready to go out and tell the world, we exist to ensure all kids diagnosed with cancer have access to care and, the same chance of survival. And we do this by focusing on kids, families, and communities. Okay. Big takeaways about altitude framing. There's no right or wrong altitude. The important thing is that you have altitude awareness and that you know at which altitude you're communicating. The second big takeaway I have around altitude is to not go down in altitude too quickly. It's very disorienting. I was able to share with you earlier that 40% of the work we do is with funders. These funders are telling me they leave these calls completely perplexed. It's very discombobulating sometimes for funders because we dive down into the details so quickly before we connect at kind of a great big high level. All right, so if you can equip your board members to be really conversant, if not fluent at altitude, I think those board members are going to really, really elevate the work you're doing. Okay, I'm going to keep moving on, guys, to the second part of our 3-part framework. So we talked about champion. I hope that makes sense. I think your plan on how to ensure that your board members are being champions, the way you do that is you sit with each of them one-on-one and you brainstorm together. How can you help elevate us? How can you help spread the word? How can you help do this, that, or the other? But really having like a one-on-one plan with each funder would be, with each board member would be the best way to go. Okay, secondly, invite. Now I'm gonna think big about invite, if you'll come along with me here. I'm gonna think about it in 2 ways, okay? The first way is the traditional way we think about it, which is who do you know? Who can you connect me with, right? We're asking for those board members to look within their own network and see, is there anyone who'd like to hear about us? Okay, is there anyone who would like to hear about us? A couple of tips around asking board members for connections. 1, don't ask the whole group over a Zoom or around a table. It's not going to turn up much. All right, so we want to meet with them one-on-one. You're going to hear this refrain from me a lot. We're going to want to meet with them one-on-one so that we can ask them who might you be able to connect us to? All right. Secondly, it helps quite a bit instead of asking the question I just did, which is who might you connect us to? It helps if we can give them some association. So we might want to share a couple tips. We might want to share an ideal persona. Hey, we've been doing some brainstorming and we think a great funder for us might be a tech startup that's younger than 3 years old, who's looking to develop, some sort of corporate social responsibility and looking to grow alongside a nonprofit. Do you know of anyone in the tech startup world? Now, I wouldn't ask that of just anyone. I'd probably ask that of a board member who we know is somewhat tied into the tech community. But we can give this ideal persona and it really gets people thinking, oh, you know who that makes me think of? We can find more names if we're looking for names. We can find more names through association than we can just by asking an open-ended question. That organization I shared with you, the one that works with childhood cancer, one of our ideal personas we came up with, they were scaling to build a center of excellence in Mexico. And so we said, who would be a great funder is a pediatric oncologist. That's a given, right? Because they work on childhood cancer, who grew up in Mexico, now lives and works in the US or Europe. So we're thinking they have capacity, and who travels to Mexico frequently. We didn't know anyone who fit that bill. We just made it up. That sounded like an ideal persona. And we went to each board member and said, this is who we're looking for. And I kid you not, we found this person through kind of planting that seed. Okay. And he ended up going to visit the site, and all's well that ends well. He ended up being a major donor to expanding the center in Mexico. So I think give some thought to an ideal persona. That can be a person, a foundation, a corporation, it doesn't matter. And the other idea I have around connecting, look at an ideal persona. The other idea is share your master prospect list. So most of you probably have some sort of list of potential funders you're tracking. Another great way is to take it to a board and say, here's who we're trying to get to. Do you know of anyone connected to any of these groups? It could be as simple as, oh, my college roommate's son works at Google. You can't imagine how these connections kind of weave together to open up to a conversation. All right. So that's, I think, how we often think about asking board members for connections. I want to expand our thinking a little bit, if you'll let me, and that is to lead generation. One thing most social impact leaders tell me is that they need more names, they need more people, they need more foundations. And this is hard work. Lead generation is hard work. It's time consuming. And sometimes it feels like it was a lot of work for nothing. All right, but we still have to do it. There's no way around it, at least not one that I have found. So I think we could ask our board members to amplify our efforts by helping us generate leads. All right, so we do not necessarily need a board member who's well connected, but if they can help us generate leads, I think they're going to probably be adding immediate value to your organization. Now, we could do a whole session on lead generation. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but I will just share a couple of ideas real quick. And I'll have time at the end of this session that I'll open for Q&A, both about this session and even about fundraising in general, if you all want, because I know there's always a vacuum of information when it comes to fundraising. So generate leads. Let's say we have a board member, they've never done fundraising, but they want to help. So there's no secret. I'm sorry to say, we do a lot of internet searching. Who's funding similar orgs? You guys know all of this, I'm sure. Look at who's funding similar orgs. If we're looking to anyone affiliated with the United States, either the organization or the funder, the 990s are a great source of information. For foundations, every grant is listed. For an organization, let's say we know there's an organization like us in the United States, we can look up their 990 and see who's funding them. Okay. The other, of course, it wouldn't be a webinar if we're not talking about AI. We're using a lot of AI right now at For Impact. We're getting smarter at it, but we're asking things like, can you tell me 12 funders who are focused on education in rural India? And you have to sift through it. It's not perfect, but we are finding some leads there. The last that I want to share, my secret trick, maybe not so secret, I don't know, is Google Alerts. You guys, anytime I work with an organization, I set a Google alert. And if you probably all know how to do this, but if you don't, you just Google the word Google Alert. And it takes you to a screen and you can set up different search terms that you want to be alerted about. And I get some of the best leads by setting up Google Alerts. Let me share a story about that. I do a lot of work with reproductive health and women's rights in East Africa. And I typically have a Google alert set up around funding, East Africa, reproductive health, and Google will send me news mentions of this. And there was one week a couple years ago where I was getting alert after alert after alert that the UN was meeting. And typically I don't follow much with the UN. It like just feels out of sight, out of mind, but I started to pay attention because the alerts kept coming in. So what happened was the UN Generation Equality Forum met in July of 2021. And what was different about this one is that $40 billion was pledged to advance gender equity. $40 billion was pledged to advance gender equity, but the organizations doing the pledging were asked to, let me see if I can change my screen share. Can you guys see this Excel sheet yet? Okay, thanks, Debbie. I'm looking at you, so thank you. The organizations that were doing the pledging were asked to share how they were going to do that. So I'm gonna actually share this. I'm gonna put this in the link, this spreadsheet, take a look at it. But the truth of the matter is each of these funders showed up at the UN and said, I'm going to pledge, let's look at like SIF here. They said, I'm going to pledge 500 million over 5 years. We're going to focus on sexual reproductive health. And here's their tweet. So every organization I work with that works in these ways, I sent them this spreadsheet. They all reached out to all of them and said, hey, I heard you just pledged $30 million. We can help you spend that exactly how you want to. And it turned up quite a bit of funding for a lot of organizations. This was all from doing a Google alert. So you guys, I think this is a way that your board members can really add value and help elevate your organization. All right, I'm going to keep rolling to the last one. I hope I'm not going too fast or too slow. It's always hard with some of these sessions where I can't see everybody, but I'm just going to assume that silence is means we're doing okay. Okay, the last one and the one I'm going to spend the least amount of time is investing. All right, I want to be clear. I think there are so many better ways a board member can provide value than by investing in the organization. However, I also think if we can get board giving across the board, literally, it really, really helps an organization. The way we typically talk about it is a commensurate, I'm probably not gonna be able to spell this right with you all here, commitment. Can you please invest in our organization with a commensurate commitment? That word commensurate means everything. For one board member, what might be $50 US to another board member might be 1,000. All right, here's why I think it's important to have board giving. And I realize every board is different. And it's even more complicated when we're working in different parts of the world. But even if it's a 10 or 15, US dollar commitment, what I like about 100% board giving is it helps the executive director be able to say, I have 100% board support. Okay, so that's very helpful for them to be able to go out there and say, we have a board that's fully invested. They're giving us time and they're all donors. The second thing is it helps give our board members credibility when they're out talking about the organization. They can say to their friends, to their colleagues, I'd love to tell you about an organization. I serve on the board and volunteer my time, and I am also, help fund it myself. This work of asking board members to help fund or invest in the organization, I think that should fall a lot on your board chair to have that conversation with board members. I think it's really hard for staff members to have that conversation sometimes, or at least in conjunction with your board chair. But I really don't want to, I really want to just emphasize the importance of thinking about all three of these roles: champion, invite, and invest. I believe if you can come up with a customized plan for each board member around how they can champion the organization, how they can invite others to get involved, or how they can invite, help us think of people or funders, and then how they could invest and sit with them one-on-one. I think that's the best practice for sure. Regarding invite, there's one trick I've seen recently that's actually working quite well in this post-COVID world, or I don't even think I should say we're post-COVID, where Zoom is becoming so commonplace. We're seeing a lot of organizations hold virtual events. It can be so simple, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, elevate a few voices, share the work you're doing. And what our board can do is our board can invite people to that event. That's often an easier thing to ask a board member than, would you mind connecting me with your employer? And so this is a great and easy on-ramp for someone to think about how they might invite others. So guys, I think what we are going, oh, this is great. I'm going to catch up on the chat, but what we're going to do right now, if you don't mind, is we're going to go into breakout rooms because I've covered a lot of material over the last 50 minutes. So what I'd love you guys to do, we're going to go into breakout rooms for, let's do 8 minutes, if that's okay. And what I'd love, there doesn't need to be very structured, but just did anything resonate with you? And can you incorporate any of this into the work you're doing? Is there anything that you can start to apply? And I think if you guys just spend the next 8 minutes talking through and learning from each other, I think that's where the real value can come from. So the Catalyst team is going to send us into breakout rooms now, and we'll reconvene back here in about 8 minutes. Great. Welcome back, everybody. I'm sorry it can't be for longer. Oh, Larry, I didn't see you in here. I recognize that background.
Yes, Ibrahim.
It's great to see you.
Nice.
So guys, we have about 15 minutes, give or take. What I'd love to do, if you're okay with this, is I'd love to just hear from a couple of you, maybe for like the next 5 minutes, just what you talked about in your room. And then we can do the last 10 minutes for Q&A, if that sounds okay to you, in a quick poll. So would anyone be brave and willing to unmute to tell me a little bit about what you all talked about? Juliet, thank you so much.
Okay, just as I was getting ready, sorry. Right, so hello everyone. In our room, I was in the room with Friday, who's in Nigeria. I'm in Ghana, and we were just talking about how difficult it is to make that ask sometimes, because you're either forming, in the case of Friday, he's forming a new register of board members. In my case, I've inherited board members. I'm 14 months in my role, and I feel as if they're a bit fatigued because there's no clarity on the length of duration of their tenure, and they've been with the organization in some cases 5 years. So that strategy of purpose and the call outs, it's a bit difficult, both for Friday, who's just starting, and for me, who's got a more established board. Debbie, who was in our room, had a brilliant idea. She said, look, it's in her experience, sometimes it's just literally putting out all those leads and calls that you're making within the organization. This is at altitude 1,000, using your strategy. So at altitude 1,000, the call should actually be physically written paper and passed around the boardroom, and you're asking people, just glance through this. Is there anyone who stands out? Anyone you know who you can help us open doors to? So that's what we discussed in our room. Thank you.
Juliet, thank you so much for unmuting, and thanks for sharing the conversation. And what I hear and am not surprised at all by is these challenges are universal. Whether you're new to the board, interacting with the board, whether you've been doing it for a while, whether you're in Ghana, whether you're in Chile, these are challenges that I find to be on a global level, regardless of the size of the organization, regardless of its age or any of these things. If I could answer one word to help, alleviate some of the dysfunction universally, it would be alignment, maybe 3 words: alignment and communication. And I think the more we can do that, so it sounds like some board members don't know how long they're supposed to be on the board for. Let's fix that early, and let's align around that, and then map out what their term should look like. But this is in solidarity, Juliet. I understand everything you're saying. Thank you for sharing. Isis, thank you so much.
Yeah, as you were talking, it occurs to me that I've always just assumed that our board understands completely what we do and how to talk about us, but I've never actually given them any training on that. So it occurs to me that I need to put aside 20-30 minutes on next board meeting and give some very focused training on what the messaging around our mission is. So
Yeah,
that was
I
the
think
big
that
takeaway.
Thanks, Isis. I think that's great. And I'm laughing because Isis and I work together a little bit. So that's also on me. It's true though. And I would even expand that to your staff. The thing about that altitude frame, you guys, it's magic out in the real world. I see it work 7 times a day. And sometimes even our staff members should be trained around our high altitude message and our what we do. And then they can go into a rabbit hole about, and I'm the M&E expert, and let me tell you all about our data and our evaluation. But I think if we can all coalesce around a unified message, that to me is magical when that happens. Okay, let's keep going. Is it Demiana?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's correct. No, you're perfect. I think I totally connecting to Isis's point about the comms. I think that, and I'm speaking from the sort of the board side. I'm a trustee with the UK-based charity, and I think a couple of concerns that have been raised is as far as packaging is concerned, then consistent messaging. How I, as a trustee, can approach donors. And also, I think that line between operations and governance, at what point do you pass that on to the staff? I think that has also been sort of a question mark as far as, being consistent about it. At what point is governance overstepping into the work of the staff? And at one point, do they pick that up? So I think that those have been question marks that have come up with my work.
Yeah, that's great. I'd love to make a quick plug. It's not great that you have these question marks, but they're also universal. There's a foundation, and I'll throw it in chat when I stop talking, but they're called the Israf Family Foundation, and they do board training twice a year. It's free. They have one session focused on women and one session focused on organizations working on the African continent. And I help out with this board training. I do this session on fundraising, but it's like 6 different presenters. There's a whole big thing on governance. So I'll put it in the chat, but if anyone's interested in this board training, it's twice a year, every year. I've been doing it now for 5 years with them. It's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, Kat, please go ahead.
Thank you, and my apologies for not having my video on. I
It's
have
quite
just
all right.
2 questions. The first one, I'm not sure I understand what the 10,000 meter is. Is it like in terms of words? How many words is it? I understand the purpose, the priorities, and the plan. I think it's just the meter, the understanding of the actual word meter that I'm not sort of getting exactly what that means.
Yeah.
And then the second question is that I'm based in Cape Town, South Africa, and I
Mhm.
know that in the African context, the number of organizations, especially when they have board members, you often find that it's the same board members who are employed or belong to organizations that almost do similar work as the very organization that they are a board member to, which makes it difficult to then, have them channel or do fundraising for this particular organization when they're expected to do the same for their main organization. What are some of the ways that you think we could approach for board members to be a little bit more, I don't know if there's conflict of interest in that, but to be a little bit more flexible so that there could be that area of free flexibility in sharing resources for the organization they're employed for or at, equally for the organization they serve on the board for?
Yeah, Kat, those are two awesome questions. And you guys, I realize my answers are really truncated per time. That's my email address. So please reach out and I'd be happy to go in depth with any of you. Okay, so let me get the second one first, Kat, which I think is a little bit easier for me. Not easier, but a quicker answer. One, should they be on the board? I think they should be on the board if they're able to contribute in a meaningful way. So if they're putting up walls saying that, oh, I do this for my day job, or I can't, I feel like I'm taking away, at some point we might need to look, should they be board members? As harsh as that sounds. Now remember, they can still add value in other ways. Like if they don't want to open up their black book and connect us with people, would they be willing to help us identify new leads? Or would they be helping to come up with some great like documents that we can send out? Are they great with design? So there's a lot of ways they can add value. But if they're very guarded, they might just not be the right board member, or maybe we put them on an advisory board. Second thought, I think when we have board members who are involved in similar organizations, in my mind, that's a great opportunity for partnership. How could you be the central person bringing these two organizations together? It's one of those like 1 + 1 = 5 situations. Like, what could we do together? I'll tell you guys, joint partnership funding right now is very popular. So if you could apply to a grant or meet with a funder or meet with a bank in Cape Town and say, we are two organizations coming together to do this work together, I think that will unlock a lot of funding potential. Kat, your question about the 10,000 meter message, I'm laughing because I debated, should I introduce altitude framework tomorrow? It's probably too much for this one session. And I think the answer was, it was maybe too much. The 10,000 meter message can be 4 words. It can be 20 words. It answers the question, why do you exist? It's our highest level message of why it is we're doing this work. All right, so sometimes the message might be, I'm just going to try to think of an example. We equip girls with the tools they need to safely navigate puberty. We exist because we equip girls with tools to navigate puberty. And I'm going to actually send a couple of examples after this of different 10,000 meter messages. It can be something like, we exist in an effort to end hunger. Now, there's going to be a ton of context you're going to add after you share your 10,000 meter message. But I would encourage you, your staff, and your board to have one 10,000 meter message that you can all like coalesce around. You can anchor yourselves to. A lot of times when we sit with funders, they'll say, can you tell me what is it you do? And our typical response is, I'd love to tell you what we do. Can I first tell you why we exist? And we exist because I don't want to put you on the spot, Debbie, which I'm going to do. I mean, what would you say Catalyst 2030's 10,000 meter messages?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I want to. The global movement of social change innovators from around the globe that are pushing to achieve the SDGs. So that's my short one, but yeah, it probably needs to be more succinct, and we're using the same exact words to achieve systems level change in the world, Good point.
Kat, that was a really, really short answer to a really big question. So I'm happy to connect with you offline to talk more. And I've done a few previous classes with Catalyst 2030 that I think are recorded where I do more on messaging.
Yes, good. Mhm.
Okay, let's keep moving. Are we okay on time, guys? Am I okay to do these
Take
last
one.
two?
We probably have time for one more.
Oh, Debbie, that's really hard for me.
I'm sorry. It's next in line is Rodeo. So sorry, Victor.
Hi, thanks.
Victor, email
Magdalena.
me, Victor.
Thank you so much, Lisa. This was great. Quick question, hopefully. I've got an advisory board which is specific for function, and then there's the board which meets quarterly. Is it appropriate for a small organization to have board members who are purely for financial and otherwise don't get involved in the business? And related, is there an optimal or not to exceed board size that you would recommend for a small organization?
That's great. When you say purely for financial, do you mean because they are a potential donor?
Just for funding purposes. That's the only
Like
reason.
you want,
Otherwise,
you want them to fund you. You want them to fund the
is
organization.
that appropriate to have board members who are there purely because they give money, but don't otherwise get involved in the business?
You know, my question there is always, do they need to be on the board? Could they still be a funder and an engaged investor in our organization, but not sit on the board? If the answer is yes, I would prefer that because they're probably happier if they don't want to be on the board. And we're probably happier because we can have a board that is a little more active. Now, sometimes I receive the question, or I have experienced myself, where funders want to be on the board. That's a little bit trickier. If they want to be on the board, I think that's a time for you all to stop and think, is there a need for them? Do they fit? You know, as long as they'll do no harm, I would probably be okay with it. But if they're going to come in and bring any dysfunction or anything like that, to me, it's probably not worth it. An ideal size, I have no right answer there. I have nothing. I think board management is really hard. And it often falls on, you know, the executive director, and it can be almost like a part-time job. So I would give you a really, really unsatisfying answer of no bigger than it needs to be. It's good to see you.
And this is amazing, Lisa. And we are so thankful for the time and energy that you put forth for us. Lisa Corcoran and Natalie Rexted coordinate the Fundraising Masterclass series. So they really help us find these really great, insightful sessions. And we appreciate all of you for being here. Two things we want to do before we close up. We'd like to launch our poll. We ask everyone to give your feedback on these sessions. It helps us refine and make them stronger, and make sure that we are communicating that to all of you. So take that poll and we'll share that. Second, as we said in the chat, we will share all the PowerPoints and presentations from this session and the recording, but we'll also go back and look at some of the other Fundraising Masterclass sessions and look at those and put them kind of a highlight document in there for you as well. But as we're leaving, we'd love for you to share your gratitude. So gratitude today, what are you grateful for today, or grateful for in your board that has helped them to be successful? So if you'd like to unmute, we do these really quickly. You can put them in the chat, or you can share them, unmute and share, but we'd love to hear, what are you grateful for today in your work? So I've got some quick ones. Thank you so much for the session. Anyone else want to share? Grateful for the insights today. I'm grateful for the Catalyst board. I think we have an amazing board, and I just think of all the ways that we can get them more engaged and help us fundraise a little bit more. Rodeo, thank you. Grateful for the presentation. Any other gratitudes just for the day, the sunshine, the lights? Feel free to unmute and share, say a quick word.
I'm grateful for my board too. Much more grateful now than I was an hour ago. So thank you for making me grateful.
Wonderful.
I
And
am
again,
super grateful for Lisa, and thank you for bringing her into the space. What an insightful masterclass. Thank you for sharing your insight.
Thank
you so much. And as you're leaving, unmute and say goodbye. We'd love to end at top of the hour, So thanks again, Lisa. We so appreciate you, and thanks to everyone for joining us.